Welcome to all. We are very happy to that we are going to start our proposed Muslim World Discourse 1. This discourse has been arranged by YC Study Group in collaboration with few universities and institutions. If Allah will, we will continue this series with the topics and subject of contemporary affairs on Muslim world from various part of the world, particularly Muslim world. Muslim scholar will deliver their views, their opinion regarding the contemporary issues, particularly the current affairs of Muslim world. We are facing COVID-19. This crisis has created lots of new negative dimension around the world. On behalf of Muslim world, how we can face this crisis in order to save our life, society, nation, and ummah favorable. We have already realized this current ongoing crisis changes many things in our life. So after this crisis, we have to face lots of challenges. These are not very easy. So today, our respected scholars, respected thinkers, respected discussion will give an impression how we can deal our post crisis situation from the Muslim world. In this case, how Muslim world will play an important role to lead Muslim world as well as whole world. Now I would like to request our honorable moderator, prominent educationist, former rector of International Islamic University, Malaysia, and very prominent media personality as well as Professor Sayyid Dr. Al-Arabi to moderate today's discourse. Prof. Arabi, please.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Sharaf Hussain. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be the moderator for this first public discourse. This public discourse is on post-COVID-19 role of the Muslim world. I'm not sure whether we are in post-COVID-19 or we're still in or stuck with COVID-19. But nevertheless, the discussion will be on the role of the Muslim world facing this COVID-19. Either we take it as being post or we are still facing the threat of the pandemic as it is today. Now, we have two eminent speakers who will speak for 15 minutes. And then we have, as you can see on the screen, 4 discussants. So I will introduce them because they are well known. If you want to know more about them, please go to the websites and you can see the detailed attributes of them. So without much further ado, I would like to introduce shortly the two personalities. First, we have Tan Sri Dr. Said Hamid Alba, former foreign minister. He's a very well-known political and social activist. He's always known. He's always known in Malaysia and throughout the Muslim world. Another speaker is Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, my schoolmate in Ibrahim School, Sugaptani. I got to compare that. He's also a very well-known social and political activist. He's one time affiliated with Aliran, but now he's the president of the Just World. So Dr. Sharaf has told me that Dr. Chandra will speak first, followed by Tan Sri Hamid. So Dr. Chandra, you have 15 minutes, followed by Tan Sri Hamid, another 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. I am happy to be in this discourse especially since a number of friends also involved in this attempt to understand the challenges facing the Muslim world. In this very brief presentation, I'd like to begin by raising two questions. Number one, are we in a post-COVID world? I don't think we are. The COVID crisis is raging in various parts of the world. Look at the United States, look at Brazil, look at India, look at Russia. I don't think it's right to speak of a post-COVID world. We are right in the thick of this crisis. And the second point I want to make is this. We talk about the Muslim world, and this we need to clarify. Why are we talking of the Muslim world? As if the Muslim world has been impacted by this crisis in a special way. In terms of victims, are Muslims the only victims? We know that victims come from all different religious, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. If you're talking about individuals and groups who are looking for solutions, they too come from different religious backgrounds. If we look at the implications in terms of geopolitics, domestic affairs, and so on, I don't think there's anything special about its impact in relation to Muslims. So I would like to see this crisis as a crisis facing humanity. And I would like to approach this topic from the perspective of citizens, of human beings in different parts of the world. Because the challenges that face us are very similar, and our response should be primarily as human beings to this crisis. Now, for a while, when this crisis began, like a number of other individuals, I thought that the COVID crisis would compel all of us, or at least a significant segment of the human family, to pause and ponder, to reflect on what is happening, to perhaps change our lifestyle, our values, our priorities. This is what I thought would happen. Now that we are 5 months into the crisis, perhaps more, I'm beginning to have very serious doubts. I don't think the crisis is going to change the human family or human civilization. My own feeling is that things are going to remain the same. After a while, things will become normal, meaning by which we will return to the status quo ante. In other words, the situation that was before the crisis, and even at the level of various aspects of interaction, we will begin to shake hands again. And I suppose we will also interact with one another, and we forget about physical distancing, and perhaps the hand sanitizer will not be that prominent in our lives, and the mask will disappear. But these are superficial aspects. What we were hoping for when the crisis broke out was that there'd be more fundamental changes in terms of values, attitudes, sentiments, in terms of our priorities, that there would be changes in relation to the structure of power, the structure of wealth, in terms of the social prestige system, in terms of the way in which nations relate to one another. Unfortunately, I don't think these things are going to happen. Why? Because the vested interests that dominate our lives are very powerful. And this is how it has been in the past, because we've had plagues and pestilences, we have had instances in history, and this has included the Muslim world and others, where millions of people have died in the past as a result of happenings of this sort. And after a while, people have gone back to the way they lived before. The Black Death would be an outstanding example in history, but there have been other instances. So my own feeling is that unless something else happens, I think things are going to remain much the same. In other words, the world that we knew before, the world centers around power, wealth, prestige, control, dominance. There will be the victimizers and the victims. I think that is going to be with us. Now, how can we make a difference? This is what really concerns me. If this is going to be the reality, if this is what is going to happen to us, how can we make things different so that somehow we will be able to shape, we'll be able to sculpt a different world, a different civilization? Now, if you see from the perspective of religion, if you look at it in terms of Islam and other religions, now fundamental transformation from a spiritual, moral perspective can only happen if it is destined by God. If it's destined by Allah, then there would be a fundamental transformation. Because a fundamental transformation must mean a transformation of the human being. And that transformation is only possible if we anchor our effort in what we as Muslims understand as Tawhid, and what others also understand as a view of humanity centering around God, the oneness of God, where we realize that because of this oneness of God, there has to be a transformation in terms of values and principles of living and all the rest of it, as it happened at the time of the birth and growth of religious civilizations at different stages in history. Now, I don't know whether this can happen, but let me just try to articulate what I would regard as an ideal vision. An ideal vision would be one where, as a result of our very deep faith in the spiritual, in the transcendent, in what lies beyond, and how that power that lies beyond can transform our lives, we would become more caring towards one another. There'll be greater empathy. There'll be less selfishness, because I see human selfishness as the root problem in many, many instances, whether it's politics or economy or cultural relations or ethnic relations. Ultimately, it is selfishness. The ability to transcend the self, the ability to go beyond ourselves, to care for others, to have empathy. This is what leads to fundamental transformation. And if we can achieve that as a result of that consciousness, and as a result of that consciousness, you find that values and priorities change. As a result of the change in values and priorities, structures and institutions change. Then you would have a different sort of civilization. Let me be more concrete in this very brief presentation. In economics, for instance, we cannot continue with the maximization of profits. We cannot continue with an economic system which glorifies the accumulation and acquisition of wealth for its own sake. That will have to change. In politics, we cannot make power the be-all and end-all of our pursuit of politics. It has to change dramatically, where serving the other becomes the whole basis of politics. And it must be genuine, it must be sincere. The same thing with ethnic relations, where you would regard the other community, as important as yourself and your own community. Likewise, in international relations, it's not just enhancing the interests of the nation state and therefore the interests of the elite that define the nation state and pursue the interests of the nation state. You will see caring for others, including others who are beyond yourself, as fundamental. This may seem idealistic, but I think there are examples here and there to show that these things have happened, they're happening, and even if it is on a limited scale, they may offer hope for the future. If you take the last point that I made about the way in which nation states relate to one another, I think it is remarkable because a great deal has been written about this, especially in recent weeks, as a result of the COVID crisis. If you look at the way Cuba, compared to almost every other country in the world, has approached this crisis, it has been exporting its medical personnel, its talent, poor as it is. It has been sharing its knowledge with the most advanced countries in the world and the ones which are right there in the doldrums. But they've been doing this because they believe that this is what international relations is all about. It's not just enhancing your own position or strengthening your own interests in a very narrow and perverse manner. Now, that's an example. And I'm sure that at the level of domestic politics and within societies, there are many examples of people who have been doing that, reaching out beyond themselves. In other words, being less selfish, less centered upon one's ego, and therefore fulfilling the most vital message of all our spiritual moral traditions. It's not performing certain rituals and so on per se. It is understanding this, transcending one's ego, that is really vital. And if we can multiply efforts of this sort, and if we can encourage this, and if we can draw this lesson from what has happened and transmit this to everyone, especially to the younger generation, then maybe there is some hope that we'll be able to achieve something else. And I would like to end on that note that it offers hope, as all great crises have in human history, but it is up to us in the end. We have to draw the right lessons, we have to make the right effort, we have to commit ourselves to change in the real sense, then and only then will there be a transformation. We just can't say, this will happen because we have got a beautiful scripture with us, or because we have got the example of a great prophet. These things don't guarantee the change. In the end, it's us, our efforts that count. We draw out the lessons, we try to understand what is happening, and then we look ahead towards the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chandra. You have highlighted the fact that that COVID-19 is a crisis facing humanity and also facing Muslim Ummah, but also it is an opportunity for us face the challenge and bring about some transformation. But the whole thing rests upon us as individuals and as Muslims in this world. Now, our second speaker is Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Alba. Tan Sri, 15 minutes for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. First of all, let me thank the organizer for inviting me to be part of the discussion in this very interesting discourse on the subject of the role of the Muslim world. I think we should thank the OIC Study Group and MWRC, Siako, University of Malaya, the International Islamic University for addressing this issue. I think it's a bit too early for us to conclude this is post-COVID. I think there is a consensus that COVID is going to be around us for a long time. And because of that, I think it's more important for us to talk about how do we manage this COVID era, an era where there are new challenges, there are new problems. I think I would not like to divide the world into Muslim and non-Muslim. I think so far as the issue of COVID is concerned, it's a problem of humanity. I think we either you look it from the perspective of religion, from the perspective of non-religion. It is definitely COVID has happened that caused the human being to look at itself, to look what role have they played in this world. And I think a lot of things that we are speaking on COVID is related to our human behavior and lifestyle. And this now with COVID, suddenly I find that this is where the Muslim world becomes important. People are starting to discuss about what is in the Quran and what is in the Sunnah. And many of the things that have been identified or encouraged or addicted in the Quran or in the Sunnah seems to be relevant to what we are facing today. I think it's a reflection. And I think some people would like to say that, there is a Muslim world. I do not know what it means by Muslim world. Muslim world, if I take it, is there a Muslim world view? I think we do not have a Muslim worldview unless we have a set of attitudes on a wide range of fundamental matters that affect us. This does not affect only the Muslim country. The Muslim world must work integratedly with connectivity with other parts of the world. So the most important role, I think there are three parties to it. One is the citizenry, the individuals in certain country. Each country has got its own way of dealing with you have the individual, you have the nation state, you have the organization. And then to concretize or consolidate all these activities, we use the facilitator of the United Nations through the WHO. But I think each country would like to exercise its own sovereignty in dealing with it. But what I think I like about the outcome of this COVID, there is more sharing of knowledge, ideas, and updates. And I don't think I have received so much information about a plague or a disease or virus that I have been educated now because of the COVID. We are seeing different perspectives. We are seeing people talking about it. That means we have become a more open global society. But I think the consequence of all these, definitely we cannot deny the fact that after this we cannot go in the same way. Now webinar become the way for us to discuss, whether in depth or superficially, various subjects of interest to human society and various subjects of interest in the global order. Will there be a change of the global order? I think politically, psychologically, economically, socially, culturally, we cannot go on as we were. We had to understand the new paradigm. I think the new paradigm like now, there will be a lot of impacts on society, on individuals as a result of COVID. It is happening now. And post-COVID, people are talking about it's going to be worse than the Great Depression. So how do government handle it? How individuals handle it? How society handles it? So I think so far as the Muslim world, if you look at I would like to say that it's not a Muslim world, but it's Muslim nation states that are governed by their own national interests. And I was very happy to see that OIC had a Zoom or webinar summit among themselves to discuss. If at all, I think the OIC countries, many of the OIC countries in the least developed group of countries. Therefore, we need a lot of assistance. We need a lot of sharing of ideas, need a lot of funding, a lot of financial assistance for us to be able to protect and take care of our citizens. So I think this is the most important thing. What after this COVID, and while the COVID is going on, there is a definite paradigm shift. The role, it means that, is there a leadership role in this particular case? Or there is a sharing of leadership? In politically, you are talking about, oh, China is playing a more important role. Or India is playing a more important role. Europe is playing a more important. US have decided to abdicate its role as world leader, a global leader. So I think you have to look at when we see this, we must look at the challenges and opportunities. And the challenges and opportunities are the new paradigms in order to suit the current situation for us to build a future. And the future is an important factor for us to understand what's going on. And I think businesses now are online. We no longer go to supermarket for the time. A lot of companies have gone bankrupt. So I think is to me what has happened in this, people tend to become more religious, spiritually. They are not looking only at the temporal world. They look at the fragility of life itself, what we should do, how we could create a better world. I think the United Nations Secretary General tried to make use of the presence of COVID or the pandemic as a way, why can't we stop conflicts? Why can't we stop wars? Why don't we have a ceasefire? But I think this even though it's a very good, positive suggestion, there is a time for reflection for us to do something that is good for human beings and humanity, good for society. Let us end wars, let us end conflict. But it is not happening. I think countries are still driven by their geopolitical interests, driven by their national interests. But for Muslim countries, I'm not going to talk about Muslim world because there is no convergence of views or opinions, or there is a world of view among Muslims other than our beliefs and faith in Allah. So I think it is important for us to collaborate more, to cooperate more, to share more, to have ideas that will enable us to move forward and get out of the situation. And the Muslim world will be able to cooperate with each other better, as they may be in the worst situation if they do not work together. And maybe it is a time that we can address the issues in a more collaborative way, more cohesive. Maybe after this, I think as this is the first series, maybe you can discuss a lot of things, a lot of, I think, issues that affect us directly on various segments of our life as an individual in society. But I'd like to conclude by saying that the Muslims, because of our faith and spiritual belief, we tend to be more reconciled to this while not leaving everything to our faith. Allah has, our Prophet has reminded us, you can only take tawakkal when you have done something for yourself, then you leave it to God. And God has reminded us, if you are tested with difficulties, at the end of it, that you will face easiness. There is nothing that has no solution. For everything God has created, Allah has created, there's always a solution. So let us be positive. Let Muslim countries work with the other non-Muslim countries. Let us see how together we can build a better world order, a world order that will share prosperity, that will share our fear, that will overcome the difficulties faced with each other based on humanity. So I like to see humanity being given more stress and emphasis in the world, that new world order that we are witnessing will evolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. I say you made a good point that even the crisis, we Muslims will fall back on Islam to give an assurance to ourselves. I think that's a very good point that you made. Now we are going to the discussions. I think we have only 4. I can see, I don't see Dr. Khalid or Walid. I can see Mr. Salahuddin Qasim Khan there. So I'd like to invite Mr. Salahuddin Qasim Khan, who's the Executive Chairman of Southeast Asian Cooperative Foundation. So Salahuddin Khan, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Prof, could you refer Dr. Alexander Wine or Dr. Ratib? Prof.
Okay, seems some technical difficulty there.
Yes, you can,
Yeah.
Dr. Ratib or Dr. Wine.
Yeah. So can you invite Dr. Ratib Junaid, who is the president of the Australian Foundation of Islamic Council. So the air is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the world, and peace and prayers are upon his messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I would like to thank the OIC study group for organizing this auspicious event. I would like to acknowledge my fellow speakers and express the honor I feel in being invited to this among such esteemed company. It is with great pleasure that I stand with you representing the big Muslim body in Australia, the Australian Federation of Islamic Council, a body that represents all the mainstream Muslims of Australia. No matter what one feels about COVID-19, it is indeed a crisis that is reshaping the world before our eyes. It is changing the way we greet each other, the way we interact, the way we pray, and the way we work. It has impacted every aspect of our lives. Citizens in different countries have felt the effect of COVID-19 in different ways to others. In that sense, it has certainly highlighted the difference in governance and which models provide for the welfare of the people well and which are failing their people. The teaching of Islam with respect to epidemic have been very helpful in locations where these teachings could be practiced. However, Muslims in many parts of the world do not have the luxury of upholding some of these teachings. For example, Muslims in Gaza who don't have sufficient access to water, sanitation, are not in the same position as the third world country that do. Failing states like my home country, Lebanon, have shown that how unprepared their governments are to deal with emergency situations. Muslims in Kashmir, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, East Turkestan just to name a few places, feel the impact of COVID-19 and suffer than more people in Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Canada, Australia, and similar nations. Last Saturday, the city of Melbourne increased in restriction to hard lockdown. More than 3,000 people in 9 public towers were forced to remain indoor prisoners in their own homes for almost a week, all because when the restrictions were reduced, many injected themselves in large gatherings where they contacted the virus and spread it. We believe in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that with every hardship comes ease, but we are still in the middle of COVID-19 and we have no idea how long it will take before any form of normal returns. Normal is unlikely to be the same norm that we lived before COVID-19. Many groups were lobbying for a different kind of normal. Many of this group have Muslims in their middle who have not been able to find another vehicle to pursue their concern. We, the Muslim leaders, need to plan now to ensure that our Islamic vision is represented and that it is given the opportunity to compete with other ideas for the betterment of humanity. Whilst we may have presence in some fields, we still don't have the potency to deliver ideas with impact necessary to place those ideas on an event field. Along with developing idea, we also need to develop the ability to amplify our voice so that it can be potently asserted. The post-COVID-19 world is going to be different because COVID-19 has allowed governments the world over the past very restrictive laws that diminish many freedoms that has been protected for a long time. Such laws will need to be wound down, and we must ally with groups that work to remove this restrictive law. We must also assert our value in the humanitarian arena, especially in ending violent conflict and oppressive sanctions, many of which have caused tremendous loss of especially Muslim lives. How will we address the situation in Kashmir, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Myanmar post-COVID-19? How will we address the termination of the environment, global warming, and Islamophobia? Do we have a shot of a Muslim unity? Our division has been the most effective tool to weaken us and marginalize our contributions. Do we have the courage to improve our unity and become a bloc again? We must develop the courage and stamina to rise to the challenges that have been raised by COVID-19. We must ally with partners that will help us achieve unity, not through harsh measures, but rather through respectful consultation and cooperation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله إن الله يحب المتوكلين. Which means, so by mercy from Allah, O Muhammad, you were lenient with them. And if you had been rude in speech and harsh in heart, they would have disbanded from about you. So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them and console them in the matter. And when you have decided, then rely upon Allah. Indeed, Allah loves those who rely upon Him. COVID-19 have given us the opportunity to show compassion from one another. Let it also be a spark for our lost unity. In many aspects of life, we are changing with the rest of the world. In this area, we are yet to properly plan beyond the odd conference. The cost of unity is not high. It starts with the will to unity, then with dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the will to keep the unity and protect it. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atib. Thank you very much for the points you've given. I think the technical difficulty faced by Mr. Salahuddin is solved, I think. Okay. Can we invite Dr. Salahuddin Kasim Khan?
Can you hear me?
Okay, is you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, most welcome.
Okay.
Good, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Well, I think we have heard two very distinguished people in the Islamic world. Laid the basis for our discussion today, from the spiritual to the real politic of the Muslim world and global politics. My approach would be more economic, being a person from the private sector. And I do agree that the Muslim world is a very broad context. Then we talk about the Ummah. But if we talk of the OIC country, it is 57 Muslim countries. But I do agree that the concept of the Ummah transcends nation states. So to keep my discussion focused, I would just like to highlight some of the figures of how OIC countries have been affected by. Hello? 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 Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So within that context, the CESRIC Ankara has given us some figures like the number of people affected in the 57 OIC countries, which stands at nearly 500,000 and 22,000 deaths as of 2nd July 2020. Now, countries like Bangladesh, where I come from, are in fact deeply impacted by COVID because of the disruption in global supply chains. Bangladesh is the second largest exporter of garments to the world. And here our exports have dropped considerably. And this is affecting the local workforce of our RMG sector, and particularly the informal sectors. And again, the drop in oil prices has deeply affected the remittances which we receive from the Middle East OIC countries. So these are very important, not only for Bangladesh, but for Indonesia and for other countries in the Southeast Asian region of the OIC. I'm talking from a sub-regional, regional aspect. I recall what Dr. DJ Habibie, the fourth president of Indonesia, who passed away recently, may Allah rest his soul in peace. He said that, having 57 OIC countries from Indonesia to Morocco, it's very difficult to coordinate their activities. But if we had regional structures, then it would be much easier. And SIACO, in fact, is working towards a regional structure of the OIC countries in this region. How regionally we can help each other to face the challenge which we are in. And as eminent speakers have said, COVID is not going to go away tomorrow. So, for example, Bangladesh in this context has sent aid to the Maldives, a naval vessel, with medicines and food stuff, has gone to Maldives with support to the Maldivian people. So Turkey has given, for example, a lot of medical support to Bangladesh during this period. So I think it is important that we look at the suffering of humanity as a whole, but also our own citizens and our neighbors. So our intention is that if we can join hands together, we can do a lot more. So the impact of lockdown has affected, as we know, education, the health services, joblessness. It is being said that nearly 25 million people will be jobless within the next couple of days, couple of months, maybe. Foreign direct investment, in which countries like Bangladesh are dependent, is going to fall by 35%, and remittances will fall by 20%. And there is going to be decline in global trade by 13 to 32%. So, the global GDP will decline from 3 to 8%. So the economic impact of COVID has to be addressed, I believe, in the context of the OIC and the Muslim world as such, because I also believe that this is a problem of humanity and we need to work for the greater good of humanity. So what we would like to say is that regarding COVID, the SDG goals are also being affected. The current crisis could be attributed to ignoring one of the major sustainable SDG Goal 3. Global Preparedness Monitoring Board in September 2019 warned of the world of an upcoming global pandemic. So the SDGs will be very severely affected by the COVID situation for less developed countries of the world, and particularly the OIC countries. So I believe that food security is another area. A lot of countries are going to be affected, particularly the landlocked countries will be affected. So if we can have regional cooperation in, of food, critical strategic food reserves or seed banks. And I'm very happy that the Islamic Development Bank has done a study with the OIC Secretariat on how to implement these national strategic reserves by collaboration amongst the OIC countries. The OIC countries, in fact, import over $65 billion worth of food items from the rest of the world, including OIC countries. So we need to think of having more, the idea of preferential trading arrangements between the OIC countries need to be fast-tracked, particularly in the supply of food, medicines. We should allow duty-free access for medical equipment, medicines in this COVID situation. And social safety net. This is very important. We have forgotten our traditional safety nets of zakat on awqaf. This has to be, institutionalized. Countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Turkey and Iran have institutionalized zakat collection and disbursement. But in countries like Bangladesh, we are totally disorganized. We don't have a proper zakat collection and distribution system, which is absolutely key for the poorer segments of our population. So I would make a request, and the good news is the World Zakat Forum has signed an MOU with UNDP on how to institutionalize zakat. So I think the best practices of zakat and the richer Muslim countries can send their zakat contribution through a network of zakat organizations throughout the world. So my request would be that the Muslim Ummah of 1.7 billion people is nearly 1/3 of the world population. And we can make a real impact on the new normal, which will, the post-COVID situation, we can be prepared for. I would like to propose more online interaction between the universities of the OIC countries. We could start regionally and then connect with the OIC technical universities to face the challenge, for example, of the fourth industrial revolution. Let us, Islam during the time of Andalusia used to be the center of knowledge of the world. We need to recreate our centers of excellence in the Islamic world for health, education, skills development, and to bring prosperity not only to the Muslims, but humanity at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Salahuddin. Thank you very much. You have given the problems, but you have identified the possibilities of cooperation among OIC member countries. So now we have Oslan and Dr. Alexander. Dr. Alexander Wang is a research fellow from the Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Alexander Wang, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to begin by thanking the organisers for giving me this opportunity to listen to two distinguished speakers and then to give some brief comments of my own on the COVID-19 crisis that the whole of humanity is currently facing. So very briefly, I'd like to pick up on something Dr. Chandra said about selfishness and about this crisis hopefully helping us to transcend the self and think more about others. Because as a Westerner, I'm from the United Kingdom, one of the things that has struck me about the COVID-19 crisis is that the developed countries, such as the ones I'm from, and particularly the US, have been hit so hard by it. Even though they're fully developed, they have very comprehensive, very wide-reaching medical coverage and so on. They have seen so many cases and so many deaths. So just a few days ago, the US had 55,000 new cases just in one day. Whereas in the UK, I think there was 4,000 deaths in just one day. When you compare this to the Islamic world, even countries that have been very badly hit by it, such as Iran, it's much worse. And I asked myself, well, why could this be? And I think that in part, at least, obviously there will be many reasons, but in part, I think it's because of the individualism which lies at the heart of Western philosophy and Western civilization, particularly in the English-speaking world. This promotes people to think, to put their own concerns above that of other people around them. And I think when that comes to the type of situation we're in now, with an infectious disease spreading through the community, this is very detrimental to our communities and to our nations and so on. So in the US, for example, where there's a need for quarantine, where there's a need for lockdown, where there's a need for people to isolate in order to protect themselves and those around them, we see protests about people demanding the right not just to go back to work to earn a living, but the right not to wear a face mask if they choose not to. The right to go out to beaches, to socialize, to go to bars, to drink, to go to restaurants, to eat, and so on. And this is, I think, rooted in, as I said, this Western individualism of the need to put the rights of the individual above everyone else. So certainly when I was young and I was taught at school, you were taught to think about yourself and your own future above that of your immediate family or your wider community. It's about what type of job do you want to get, how much money do you want to earn, all those types of things, rather than thinking about how can I contribute to my community and so on. And I think that has fed into this current crisis and has, in part, in combination with many other factors, has helped the well, helped has led the crisis to become perhaps much worse in some European countries and North American countries than it has been in the Islamic world, where of course we have this emphasis on the Ummah, where we have built in to our religion and therefore in our culture and our way of life, this idea that we do have responsibilities towards each other. So I know, as Dr. Chandra said, that this is very much an ideal in some ways and that it's not lived out. But nonetheless, speaking as somebody who came from a very individualized society, it is certainly there and present in Malaysia and in other Islamic countries in a way that it isn't in European countries, just in the way that we are taught to pray together, for example, even if it's only once a week on a Friday. It brings us together and gives us a sense that we belong to a wider community. The way we pay Zakat as well, we share the wealth. And again, this gives a sense of duty towards other people. And I think within the context of COVID-19 and those kinds of crises, this, I think, helps us to obey lockdowns, to not make outrageous demands about privileging our own rights to go outside or to not wear face masks if it suits us, without thinking about how that would impact upon other people. So I think the Islamic world in general, and certainly the Islamic culture, I think in terms of how we can contribute to the current crisis the world is facing, I think our strong sense of community, of responsibility to each other, of being, Khalifa in a sense, of looking after the world around us, I think that this can inform the wider world. It's something that Western countries, whether in Europe or elsewhere, can learn from and try and institutionalize themselves in order to help them deal with something that affects the entire community in potentially a very, very negative way. So that's what I would like to contribute. I think that's my 5 minutes, so I can stop there.
Okay, due to some technical difficulties, we couldn't contact Walid Fikri and Dr. Roslan No. We have about 10 minutes or so before we close. So can I just invite the two speakers again, then to make additional comments or for them to answer points raised by the discussant? Can I invite Chandra again? Chandra Muzaffar? Are you there? Yeah, Chandra.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Said, Ravi, and friends. I'll be very brief because I've said quite a bit. I just want to perhaps focus upon 2 points in these closing remarks. Crisis of most kinds. One could look at the structures, one could look at the culture, the underlying values, attitudes of its culture. Now, if you look at the structures, I think one of our speakers, it was Brother Salahuddin from Bangladesh, rightly pointed out what the situation is in concrete terms as far as various countries are concerned. We have to do, I think, a proper audit. After perhaps another year, a year and a half, at the situation that has faced all of us, the whole of humanity, and of course, in the course of which we would want to look at some of the figures that pertain to Muslim countries, that I think is very, very important in terms of the economy and transportation, its impact upon education, upon healthcare, tourism, the whole works. A proper auditing, an appraisal, an assessment has to be done. The OIC may be able to help. They've got agencies, the links that they can harness for this purpose. And I hope that that's an endeavor which will be undertaken. And one hopes that the OIC will be responsive to this plea that we do a proper auditing after some time has passed. Our immediate concern is to attend to those who are ill, those who have been bereaved by this crisis, the economic victims of the crisis. That's our immediate challenge. But after a while, after a certain period of time, I think we'll have to look at this proper auditing. Number two, culture. What are the attitudes that have led to this? I alluded to this in my presentation, so had others. And Brother Alexander Wayne had elaborated upon this from the perspective of someone who had been brought up in a Western society. And I'm glad that this point has been made, because if you look at elite responses to the crisis, in the United States, in Britain initially, and even in countries like Italy, France, there was undoubtedly a cultural dimension. This whole notion of the individual, the enthronement of the individual, the way in which the individual is glorified to the point where you cannot think of the collective. You cannot appreciate the need to sacrifice your own individual interests, because there is a larger challenge facing all of us, and we'll have to give up things that may be precious to us so that everyone can survive. And it's true what Alexander said, that if you look at this dimension more deeply, you'll realize that, say, a country like Korea, South Korea, and Japan, China, these societies have a certain notion of the collectivity. It's also true of certain countries in Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, Singapore, a certain notion of collectivity, where people don't question. You see it as something that is natural, something that is normal to think of others. I agree that even this value has been eroded over the last few decades and centuries as a result of various influences, including Western colonial influence, and also the way in which we have embraced in an unthinking manner some of the worst aspects of capitalism. But if we can look at ourselves and look at some of these underlying values and the need to develop a notion of a collective ethic, but not just a collective ethic in the way in which the concept of the collectivity had been used in, say, the old Soviet Union. This is something else. But a notion of the other, of inclusiveness, of being together, the idea that we are a human family, those beautiful lines from Sheikh Saidi, the great Persian poet, centuries ago had said that you're not human. You're not truly human if you cannot feel for the pain of the other. Now, that sort of notion, we have to bring it back, especially, and I would like to emphasize this if I may, brothers. Unfortunately, there's no sister in our program this afternoon. But brothers, I want to emphasize this point if I may, that it is so vital for us to think of the human family from a different dimension. This notion of us being one entity, with globalization, with the sort of technical and scientific changes that have taken place, with changes in geography, with vast changes that have taken place in our understanding of history, we have to ask ourselves if we should not look at us, especially from a moral, spiritual perspective, and say, this is what it is, that we are one in a very deep and profound sense. And that message was there right from the beginning, from the Zoroastrian faith and Hinduism, and certainly in Islam, very, very clear. So we want to articulate that message again. But we're going to express that oneness, not in some sort of mechanical, artificial manner, which is what had been attempted by certain experiments in modern history. Let's try to do this as something which is a reflection of our perennial wisdom, our eternal wisdom, which I think should once again inform our efforts to rebuild human civilization. We should once again be influenced and inspired by that eternal wisdom, which is the greatest gift that our spiritual, moral traditions have endowed us with. Let's harness this for the betterment of humankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. You have summarized and touched, I think, the points raised by Dr. Rashed, looking at rights of the individual and rights of the community. So certain political systems place emphasis on rights of the individual, whereas other political systems or other culture give emphasis to the rights of the community that overrides the individual. Let's hear from Tansi Said Hamid Alba run out the whole discussion. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Said Arabi, for allowing me to say some concluding words. I think from the discussion that we have had, what to me is very clear is that we are all agreed that there must be a comprehensive proposition about various aspects of the world as it impacts us as Muslim and how we can contribute to that. And then we must build a unified and comprehensive view of the world around us and our man's place. What should we do? And I think we have to look at our basic assumptions and images toward understanding all existing things and beings. I think we have emphasized on the need for unity, for the need of cohesiveness of Muslim countries. We are very divided when it comes to the issue of Syria, Yemen, Palestine, Libya, Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. We should revisit. We need to contribute to the world as a group, and so that will not be being stereotyped. So what I consider from listening to all the discussions is that there is a requirement for us to establish, just now some Chandra or Alexander Wynne say about, auditing, we must do auditing, Salahuddin and Alexander Wynne talk about, the difference between our culture of collectivity, our culture of community, and the individualism of the West. I think looking at all these things, definitely we can contribute by establishing a guide or map towards realizing all our objectives and intention, how we can, in the social, in the political, economic, and cultural view and relationships, there are new things that we have to look at. So I would like to say that the Muslim world or Muslim countries should think of how we can cooperate, what type of mechanism that is effective, that will be effective in cooperation in various areas, what sort of thing that we need to discard, how do we move forward? I think we always look and say that, we had a fantastic civilization, we had our golden age, but how can we make use of our past in order to build the future? How do we improve our politics, whether internally or externally? What are the geopolitical issues that affect us? How do we look at education? COVID is gives us an opportunity to look this. The job market, as mentioned by Salahuddin, all because coming from the private sector, job market, export, import, mobility of goods and services. These are the things and I think many of us that have developed, we tend to forget because we import food over 65 billion US dollars. And why don't we look at the role of agriculture? Role of agriculture. And some of our Muslim countries don't have infrastructure. OIC has got mechanisms like the Islamic Development Bank and other funds in order to see this. And how do we improve infrastructure? How do we better improve our exchanges of views and ideas on economic, on communication, and on the financial sectors? So I think the challenge is tremendous, and there is a role for us, there is a place for us to look at how we can play a part that we are considered not to be a marginal segment of the global community, but a primary segment of the global community. And I think most importantly, finally, I would just like to say, Muslim countries must be united in all areas where issues of humanities are important. I think we should not make use of this COVID as a way of constraining individual freedom, but at the same time, how do we upgrade societal rights and how society can share in the future wealth and growth of the country post-COVID. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I think I've enjoyed listening to all of you. I've learned a lot. And I think if only we can think ourselves as an ummah with one tawheed and we follow the dictates of Islam in order for us to contribute to the global order that we are going to see coming as a result of COVID, as a result of us managing and tackling COVID. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Tan Sri. I'd like to say thank you very much to all the speakers, two speakers, Tan Sri Hamid and Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, and to our discussants, Mr. Salahuddin, Dr. Akif, and Dr. Alexander Wayne. Thank you very much for making this discourse very lively. I don't think I need to moderate because the fire is not that high. We all agree it's not that hot. We all agree that there is a challenge to the Ummah. There's also a challenge to OIC, how OIC can governize its member states so that they will get the best from the member states to contribute to the overall Ummah. But at the same time, I think the speakers and the discussants made a point that we have to see this COVID more than COVID facing the Muslim Ummah. We have to see COVID as challenging the Muslim Ummah and the whole humanity. But nevertheless, we need to move beyond the present situation and acknowledge that post-COVID is still a long way, but we cannot wait for COVID-19 to end. But we should do everything that we can do now so that we can be able to protect and advance ourselves. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much to the OIC study group for giving me the opportunity to be the moderator. So it's my duty now to hand back this function to the organizer. So may I hand it over to Dr. Ishara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Moderating this session very well. Alhamdulillah, we have received lots of indication, lots of point related to Muslim world as well as whole world. Hope we will address in future through our next series with the particular subject of Muslim world and as well as other worlds. I would like to draw on few issues, particularly geopolitics of the world. We have already observed many scholars, particularly from the West, they opine that the world is going to face, world is going to see new paradigm of or paradigm shift of the world with a new world order or new narrative. And many Western scholars agreed that the new narrative or new world order will be led by China, but it is not confirmed. It is an expectation. But still, world is controlled by Western world order, particularly led by United States. But to the context from the Muslim world, we have to think how Muslim world dynamically will contribute, will play a positive, effective, dynamic role as a world power, not a subservient minor power. Our expectation through the discussion, we would like to see Muslim world, that Muslim world will act as one of the leading world power with the Islamic ideal world order. In this case, I would like to draw all of your attention how we can think to the context of current crisis. Many people already opine that this crisis is natural, it is a spiritual crisis. So we have to think how we can use the Islamic values, Islamic ideal, Quranic tradition, particularly the dynamic lessons of Prophet Muhammad Mustafa to the current context for our nations, particularly Muslim nation, particularly Ummah. If we follow the Prophet lessons from the context of modern dynamism, we can find lots of education, lots of direction for leading the future world for peaceful, progressive, and balanced position. So we have to conclude in a point that the Muslim world should play a positive role as a dynamic power, not any less power. So inshallah, we will arrange another program with the appropriate subject, and we will invite other scholars even from this participant. So today, in the end, I would like to give thanks to all speaker, moderator, participant, discussion, and who have joined from outside of the discussion from the various side. I hope all of you have enjoyed the discussion with the very valuable contribution of our participant. So now I would like to request Tansiri Sayyid Hamid Alvar, Aulad Rasul, to make a dua at the end of the program. Please, Tansiri Sayyid Hamid, please lead a dua.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد رسول الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Oh Allah, please give us light, so that we will be part of a greater ummah, united in our endeavor to contribute not only to ourselves, but to the whole global community. Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. It's only you, and through you, that we can ask for mercy and compassion to show us the right path, to show us the straight path, so that we'll be a community of righteous and good people to lead the world, where we can live together with love and forgiveness. So make us strong in our iman, give us tawfiq and hidayah, give us barakah and rahmah. Sallallahu alaihi Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa baraka wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.